empathy. In the last few lessons, I shared with you the importance of listening to and expressing needs and feelings as a way to cultivate understandings and positive relationships between people. While it sounds simple, this is very challenging to do, especially in times of conflict because it's so much easier to judge and blame others. Hopefully, with practice, you're getting better at understanding your own and others' needs and feelings. Understanding another person exactly where they're at is about extending empathy. Empathy is often misunderstood, and what we often think are empathetic acts are often non empathetic acts. There are also roadblocks that can prevent us from extending true empathy. So, in this lesson, I hope to clarify what empathy is and what it's not, and share ways in which we can practice true empathy both towards yourself and towards others. So, to begin with, in order to understand what empathy is, it helps to understand what empathy is not. So, at this point, I will share with you a conversation between me and my husband to share examples of ways in which we can respond in non empathetic manners to someone sharing a story. So, Brendan,
Yeah.
can I talk to you about what happened this morning?
Sure.
It was just like, it was such a crazy morning, and I just want to share it with someone.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, so we got up in the morning and was doing other things. But anyway, Lenka got up and then asked her to get dressed for her kindergarten. And then she just slowly took her clothes out, and it was like, it was taking her forever to put her clothes on.
I remember. I remember the last time it happened to me, and it just takes so much time, and I get so cranky with it.
I know, but like she was like spacing out like between each piece of clothing that she was putting on, and I was getting a bit, it was just getting a bit frustrating. But anyway, at that point, I realized I had to make Issei's breakfast. So I decided to boil some oatmeal and I started to get that going.
Wait, why are you even doing that? Like the baby website says that he's not even 8 months old. You don't need to worry about that because he doesn't need to do it 2 times a day. You should look at that website more.
I don't know. Like I think he was ready for it because I've been doing that for the last few days anyway. So I still made his oatmeal and and then we sat down to feed him. And then I looked at the watch and saw that it was already past 8 a.m. and I couldn't believe it because I had to get Lenka to kindergarten by 8:30. But it's just so hard to fit everything in because I do my yoga in the morning and that goes until about 7:30.
Well, why don't you just go to bed earlier, right? So from tonight, go to bed earlier. You can get up earlier. And if you do your yoga session earlier, you're gonna not feel as rushed as you do now.
Yeah, I know that, but that's what I struggle with is that like getting up early. But I gotta get the yoga in, or it affects the rest of the day. So anyway, that's a really important part of my day. But anyway, so and then as I'm feeding Issei, I look over and I see that Lenka is still not getting dressed. Like she's only half dressed. And I got so annoyed that I spoke to her pretty hard. Like it was probably almost shouting, and it made her cry. Like
wait, have a look at this. Have a look at Bob. He posted this the other day. He had a fight with his daughter. He posted. Pretty much everyone in the world right now is having arguments like this.
What do you mean everyone in the world is having a fight?
Times are tough right now. No, I'm serious.
But that has nothing to do with the fact that I am actually pissed off at Lenka. I'm actually angry at Lenka. But anyway, so I don't know. It just seems like it's a pattern that's building up. Like the little things that she does, she doesn't mean to do bad things, but it just really annoys me. And then I get really snappy at her. I feel like I get snappy at her more than I do at Issei.
Well, why like with her? Like, why does it? Why her? Because you're pretty patient with, like, at work. You're pretty patient with me. Why just her?
That's what I don't know. I don't know why this is happening, but it's a pattern that's emerging.
And so that's something that happens, and I always regret afterwards when I
Right.
after I shout, you
Okay.
know.
Okay.
But anyway, as all that stuff is happening, my brother called,
Right.
and and I couldn't pick up the phone because I was too many other things to do.
Yeah.
And I saw that it kept ringing and ringing.
Yeah.
And but I just kept ignoring it, and I got everything ready, and we walked out of the door, and then I finally checked the phone,
Yeah.
and I saw that there were 5 missed calls. But on
Uh-oh.
top of that,
Yeah.
there was a text message from him saying, like, how could you not pick up the phone? Like, I need you.
Yeah. Well,
And
listen.
how ignorant are you? And it's like judging me so
Your
much.
brother has always been mean. Your brother has always been mean to you. He's always been hard, and he never understands what you're going through.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if he's always like that, but like at that moment, it was just like it really got to me, you know. And it still gets. It's like it still is affecting me somewhat. And he's asked to call back, but I just don't know if I'm ready to call back just yet. Like,
Well,
I don't know if I can call
wait a
back
minute.
for.
Well, listen. Like all things considered, he is your brother, and I don't know. It's the right thing to do to call him back. I mean,
But I'm not. I don't know if I'm emotionally ready to face that, you know. And so so that's something that is really bothering me.
Yeah.
Anyway, then we finally get into the car,
Right.
and I'm driving her to kindergarten, but I look over and she looks really sad, and I felt so bad because I think it was because I shouted at her. So I decided that I should apologize, and I actually said, I'm really sorry for
yeah. Well,
that.
it's good that you did that. You know, like that'll help fix that relationship. So that's good that you did that. You know.
Thanks, but yeah, okay. So I said sorry, and she felt like she was, she said she was okay, but I just don't know if I don't know. Anyway, so finally got her to kindergarten, and it was slightly late, but it was okay. But anyway, it was such a crazy morning, and just like full of feeling bad in different ways,
Yeah.
And
I totally get that it was a difficult morning for you, but you were unbalanced. I get that you were rushed, but you know what? You're going to feel better in no time, and at least it's not as hectic and as crazy as this all the time, you know.
but it's like this quite a lot, I think. But anyway, I just really wanted to share with you how I felt and what was going on this morning.
Yeah, that sounds hard. Yeah.
So thanks for listening.
That's right.
Now, what you saw was a video portraying various examples of non empathetic behaviors, and some of these examples included judging. Now, this happened both positively and negatively. Positive judgment is offering a praise or agreeing with someone, and negative judgment is like labeling or criticizing or blaming someone. Either way, value judgments are cast by the listener. There was also giving advice or preaching. Now, this seems like it could be a helpful act, but this is about telling the other person what they should or should not do and brings attention away from the speaker's experiences. And there was also distracting. This is like the case of my husband kidding about every family having a fight. It is responding with humor or sarcasm to distract the person from the heart of the problem. And then there's reassuring and sympathizing. This is saying poor you, but following up with don't worry, it'll be better. And this is a way to make the other person feel better. But what this does is that it denies the current emotion that the speaker is having. And then there's sharing personal stories. Now, this is very common to bring up an episode of when something similar happened to you. Now, it's reassuring to know that someone has gone through a similar episode, but the story now shifts from the speaker and to the listener, and everyone's felt experiences are different. So, a non empathetic response is any response that doesn't meet an experience with curiosity or that doesn't allow it to be felt and known just as it is. As you were watching the clip, you might have noticed that you have a tendency to also respond to your friend in one or more ways that you witnessed in the clip. Although your intention in giving advice or sharing your personal stories may be in the spirit of showing solidarity with another person, when this is done habitually or unconsciously, you risk losing connection and understanding with another person. On the other hand, giving empathy is about meeting the person exactly where they're at with curiosity and openness. Empathy is something that drives connection between people. So, do we all have the ability to empathize, or do only some of us adopt the ability to empathize by learning it? Now, what's interesting is that empathy is actually innate. This means that we are all born with the ability to empathize. As humans, we are biologically hardwired to connect with each other, and this is because we have what we call mirror neurons. So imagine that you and I went for a jog on a very sunny, hot day and we are sweating profusely. We finish our jog and come back, and I take out an ice cold bottled water from the fridge and start chugging it down my throat. Now, as this happens, my neurons are firing, sending signals of satisfaction and pleasure throughout my body, and my body is loving the sensation of this ice cold water trickling down my throat. And you are standing in front of me, watching me drink the water. Now, what's interesting is that as you watch me, you have mirror neurons inside your brain that are firing exactly the same information throughout your body. This firing gives you a vivid imagination of what it would feel like to have this icy cold water trickling down your throat and to feel your thirst being satisfied as a result. You are experiencing what you believe I'm experiencing, and this is again because we all have what we call mirror neurons. Now, this means that when you see me experiencing a lot of pain, emotionally or physically, your mirror neurons will fire and will give you a very good idea of the pain that I'm experiencing. Now, the reason why these mirror neurons are important for us is because we as humans are social beings. We have a need to be seen and to be heard and to matter in order to survive. We need empathy for both our joys so that we can connect in our successes and also our sorrows so that we can be cared for in our losses. If empathy is innate, then why does it not happen all the time? Why does creating deep connections through empathy seem challenging at times? Well, although we are hardwired to connect, what's interesting is that we are also hardwired to self protect to avoid the pain of rejection. If you reflect back in your last couple of years, you might be able to recognize experiences in which you were judged negatively or rejected or hurt by a friend. When events like these happen, we build our defense mechanism to self protect and engage in behaviors like distracting ourselves with social media or alcohol to avoid pain, or avoiding connections with others that put ourselves in a vulnerable position. These behaviors become habits over time. So, as adults, we tend to resist empathetic connections with others to protect ourselves from the pain of vulnerability. Now, if you have built a habit to respond in non empathetic ways with others, then it's also likely that you have learned to get less in touch with your own feelings and your own needs for empathy as well. So let's imagine that you got in a fight with a friend or you scored poorly on a project. Rather than creating a space to self empathize and understand your emotions and your needs, you might find yourself in a habit of distracting yourself, perhaps being on a phone and on social media to stay away from the issue or judging yourself in one way or another. Now, these habits are essentially not providing yourself with the self empathy that you need to understand how to look after yourself, especially when you're going through difficult experiences. Now, self empathy is very important because if proper conditions are not met within us, empathy is difficult to extend to others. We need to cultivate our awareness to check in with ourselves and understand how we are. And if proper conditions are not met, there is a danger that we project our internal state to how we respond to our peers. And projecting our internal state often shows up in the form of various non empathetic acts that you saw in the first role play. The response becomes more about ourselves rather than about whom we mean to be receiving. So, what are those states that block empathy? Well, sometimes you could have unmet physical needs, which means that you could be tired or hungry and you just don't feel physically right to be there for someone else. Or you could be stressed or rushing to another place, or you could be wanting or to be attached to a certain outcome. This means that, for example, if someone shares with you that they want to skip class, but you think they should not skip class, then you would be attached to this outcome and would be refusing to listen to their story openly. Or you could be experiencing strong emotions like anger or sadness in that moment, which might prevent you from listening to the person fully. Or you could be needing empathy yourself. This means that if you have not had a chance to be listened to and understood for where you are at, then you might not be in a state to do that for someone else. Or you could have judgment for someone that could prevent you from listening to that person fully. Or you could have fear of being flooded or disappearing into someone else's experiences. So you try to purposely put a distance with the person sharing their experiences so you don't have to be absorbed in the discussion or in their story. Or you could be confusing empathy with having to agree with the person you're listening to. And what I want to emphasize to you is that empathy doesn't mean that you have to agree with someone. And it means simply to meet the person exactly where that person is at. Sometimes with self empathy, when you notice that you're not in a proper emotional or physical state to extend empathy towards others, then it's important to be honest about it and ask that the conversation takes place at another time. Sometimes it's enough to notice your state and take a deep breath and ground yourself to the present and connect to your intention to understand another person before engaging in an empathetic act. So, even with our tendencies to self protect and with various roadblocks that can prevent us from empathizing, what are some ways in which we can cultivate empathy to build connections? Well, there are a few different ways in which we can practice empathy for other people. The first step is to offer silent empathy, which is to be fully present in that moment. You don't have to say anything, but show with your whole body that you're there for the person and receive the person where they are at. The second thing to do is to summarize or paraphrase what the person has said. So, after the speaker has shared with you a few things, you can say, "Let me see if I got what you're trying to say," and paraphrase what you heard the speaker said. This is useful not only to check that you're both on the same page, but also to make sure that your speaker feels as though they're really being listened to. And lastly, this is something that we've been practicing and is to check on their feelings and needs. This requires us to really pay attention so that we can understand the feelings and needs behind what the other person has shared. By checking with the other person about their feelings and needs, this action is showing the person that you're receiving them where they are at and not imposing your own interpretations or judgments to their experiences. Now, all of these forms of empathy require us to be very present in every communication we have with each other. Now, besides this presence, we have to put aside what we want to say or our own agendas and to be willing to not know what the right answer is. And this requires us to practice humility. With practice, however, we can cultivate empathy even though we have mechanisms built in to self protect and detach ourselves from empathy. So, in summary, empathy is about meeting the person exactly where they're at. And this is quite challenging to do as we quite often get into habits to respond to others in non empathetic ways without realizing it. We can get into this habit as we have a tendency to self protect from the pain of vulnerability, and also we don't take the time to self empathize to notice if we're in a proper condition to extend empathy to others. However, we all have the ability to cultivate empathy, and we get better at it with practice. So, why is the practice of empathy important, especially in a conflict? Well, being heard creates goodwill. This means that when one is heard first, then they are more willing to hear us and engage in resolving the issue. Many conflicts persist because so often we don't listen to each other and stick to our own judgments. The practice of empathy creates a bridge towards connection when this is broken. So, in the lessons to follow, we'll be delving deeper into building skills for connections and resolutions in conflicts.